and the dependable staff of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home who is genuinely concerned with your care. At J.W. Williams Funeral Home, you are aptly served by the proprietor, president, Deacon Arthur L. Parker, who continues the traditions and values set forth by the past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams. Your announcers for the J.W. Williams Funeral Home Sunday morning program are Deacon Arthur L. Parker, Reverend Isaac H. Owens, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, Minister Frankie Harmon, Miss Sandra Johnson, and Deacon Earl Clark, Jr.
Thank you, and good morning, friends. We come to you this morning to bring announcements, dedications, and songs. We certainly hope that your day may be brighter after listening to our program. The family of Mr. Garrett Carter of Americus, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Dorothy Ruth Smith Ray of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Miss Delangia LaShawn Blackman Carter of Hawkinsville, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Ruby May Harrington Ross of Warner Robins, Georgia, would like to thank their many friends for the food, the flowers, the condolences, and all other expressions of sympathy and kindness shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. Mr. Garrett Carter, age 43, of 136 Starlight Circle, Americus, Georgia, died Thursday, September 21st, of injuries sustained in an automobile accident. The funeral service for Mr. Garrett Carter, age 43, was held Sunday, October 1st, at the Pavilion at Eastview Cemetery in Americus, Georgia. His loving sister, Miss Gabrielle Carter, delivered the eulogy. Survivors include his loving and devoted mother, Miss Diane Barker Carter of Americus, Georgia. His loving and caring sisters, Miss Gabrielle Carter, Miss Sandria Carter, all of Americus, Georgia. His beloved aunts and uncles, Miss Leela Harris, Miss Joanne Barker, Miss Loretta McDonald, Miss Lorraine Barker, Mrs. Tammy Patilla and her husband, Mr. Arthur Patilla, and Mr. Johnny C. Barker, all of Americus, Georgia. Miss Pamela Wells of Montezuma, Georgia. Mr. Clarence Barker and his wife, Mrs. Kim Barker of Riverdale, Georgia. Mr. Timmy Barker and his wife, Mrs. Teresa Barker of Conyers, Georgia. And Mr. Philip Carter of Korea. A host of nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive Mr. Garrett Carter, age 43, of 136 Starlight Circle, Americus, Georgia. Mrs. Dorothy Ruth Smith Ray, age 75, of 1303 East 8th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia, died Tuesday, September 26, at her residence in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Dorothy Ruth Smith Ray, age 75, was held Tuesday, October 3rd, in the chapel of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home in Cordele, Georgia. Her pastor, the Reverend Lorinda Ray, pastor of the Beautiful Zion Baptist Church, officiated. The burial followed at the Sunnyside Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Mr. Kiefer Smith and his wife, Mrs. Eula Smith of Jonesboro, Georgia, Mrs. Angela Buckholtz and her husband, Mr. Dennis Buckholtz of Pinehurst, Georgia, Mr. Eric Smith of Georgia, Miss LaShawn Coley of Perry, Georgia, and Miss Aquaria Coney of Vero Beach, Florida. 13 beloved grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren, her loving and caring sisters, Mrs. Bertha Riggins and her husband, Mr. Carl Riggins of St. Petersburg, Florida, Mrs. Brenda Lucas and her husband, Mr. Zimmer Lucas, Mrs. Carolyn Trotman and her husband, Mr. Abraham Trotman, and Miss Eula Kim Smith, all of Cordele, Georgia. Her beloved brothers, Mr. Raymond Smith, Sr. of Tampa, Florida, Elder Albert Smith and his wife, Mrs. Genia Smith of Montgomery, Alabama. Her beloved aunts, Mother Leela Smith and Mother Sarah Roundtree, both of Cordele, Georgia. A host of beloved nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends, to include Deacon Joe Wedges of Cordele, Georgia, and Miss Ida Simmons of Macon, Georgia, survived Mrs. Dorothy Ruth Smith Ray, age 75, of 1303 East 8th Avenue, Cordele, Georgia. Mrs. Delangia LaShawn Blackman Carter, age 50, of 22 Piney Wood Drive, Hawkinsville, Georgia, died Thursday, September 28th at Navison Health in Macon, Georgia. The funeral service for Ms. Delangia LaShawn Blackman Carter, age 50, was held Saturday, October 7th, in the chapel of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home in Cordele, Georgia. Her beloved uncle, Pastor Isaiah Williams, officiated. The burial followed at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted son, Mr. Travius Blackman of Columbus, Ohio, 6 beloved grandchildren, her loving and devoted mother, Mrs. Alma Blackman Spivey, and her husband, Sir Joseph Spivey of Hawkinsville, Georgia, her loving and caring sisters, Miss Tamika Zimmer of Macon, Georgia, Miss Demetrius Oliver and her husband, Mr. Andrew Oliver of Eastman, Georgia, Mrs. Orlanta Ziegler of Albany, Georgia, Miss Felicia Taylor and her husband, Mr. Theopolis Taylor of Snellville, Georgia, and Mrs. Jeannie Durham and her husband, Mr. Clarence Durham of Cochran, Georgia. Her beloved brothers, Mr. Extra Holly Blackman and his wife, Mrs. Bridget Blackman of Albany, Georgia, and Mr. James Ziegler and his wife, Mrs. Keisha Ziegler of Hawkinsville, Georgia. Her beloved aunts and uncles, Mr. Willie Blackman and his wife, Mrs. Brenda Blackman of Crestview, Florida, Mr. Daniel Blackman and his wife, Mrs. Margarita Blackman, Mr. Roger Blackman of Athens, Georgia, Mr. Jimmy Blackman and his wife, Mrs. Marty Blackman of Tampa, Florida, Mr. Tyrone Blackman of Cordele, Georgia, Miss Lucinda Wilson and her husband, Mr. Ernie Wilson of McDonald, Georgia, and Mrs. Mary Williams and her husband, Elder Isaiah Williams of Fort Myers, Florida. A host of nieces and nephews, two of whom she reared, Miss Samantha Cockrell of Eastman, Georgia, and Mr. James Ziegler of Cochran, Georgia. A host of cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. Delangia LaShawn Blackman Carter, age 50, of 22 Pineywood Drive, Hawkinsville, Georgia. Mrs. Ruby May Harrington Rawls, age 74, of 102 Vera Drive, Warner Robins, Georgia, died Wednesday, October 4th, at the home of her beloved daughter in Warner Robins, Georgia. The family visitation and public viewing for Mrs. Ruby May Harrington Ross, age 74, was held Saturday, October 7th at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Mr. Rodriguez Power and Mrs. Latricia Reese, both of Warner Robins, Georgia, 15 loving grandchildren, 7 great-grandchildren, her beloved sisters, Mrs. Lily Brown and Mrs. Vivian Williamson, both of Cordele, Georgia, Mrs. Rashana Ali of St. Petersburg, Florida, and Miss Sarah Page of Kentucky. Her beloved brother, Mr. Jimmy Harrington of Indianapolis, Indiana, a host of nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. Ruby May Harrington Ross, age 74, 102 Valerie Drive, Warner Robins, Georgia. Again, the family of Mr. Garrett Carter of Americus, Georgia, the family of Mrs. Dorothy Ruth Smith Ray of Cordele, Georgia, the family of Mrs. Delangia LaShawn Blackman Carter of Hawkinsville, Georgia, the family of Mrs. Ruby May Ross of Cordele, Georgia, and Warner Robins, Georgia, would like to thank their many friends for all of the many kindnesses shown to them during their hours of sorrow and bereavement during the past week. May God bless each of you is their prayer. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors serving Cordele and Vienna were in charge of each of these arrangements during the past week. And now, it is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcements. Mother Fannie Lee Harris Butler, age 87, of 205 Burden Circle, Americus, Georgia, died Wednesday, October 4th, at the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center in Americus, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Miss Frances Harris Reddick, Miss Beverly Butler Jones, Mr. Christopher M. Butler, Mrs. Cynthia Butler Davis and her husband, Mr. Eddie Davis, and Mrs. Cassandra Butler Roberts and her husband, Mr. Moses Roberts, all of America's Georgia. 11 beloved grandchildren, 13 great-grandchildren, 2 beloved and devoted brothers, the Reverend Norris Harris and his wife, Mrs. Pamela Harris, the Reverend Gerald Harris and his wife, Mrs. Martha Harris, both of America's Georgia. 4 loving and devoted sisters, Miss Kathleen Harris Muntz and Miss Janice M. Harris, both of America's Georgia. Mrs. Ruby Harris Maddox and her husband, Mr. Clyde Maddox, of Riverside, California, and the Reverend Cheryl Harris King and her husband, Mr. Willie King of Columbus, Georgia. 2 beloved sisters-in-law, Mrs. Annie Maud Harris and Mrs. Maddie Sue Harris, both of America's Georgia. 1 beloved brother-in-law, Deacon John Hall of America's Georgia. A devoted cousin, Mrs. Annie Bell White Moss of America's Georgia. 4 godsons, Mr. Troy Lewis, Mr. Linwood Volley, Mr. Michael Harris, and Mr. Johnny Womack. 1 goddaughter, Mrs. Deborah Foster. A host of beloved nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many other special friends survive Mother Fannie Lee Harris Butler, age 87, of 205 Burton Circle, Americas, Georgia. The funeral service for Mother Fannie Lee Harris Butler, age 87, will be held Monday, October 9th at 12 noon in the sanctuary of the Friendship Baptist Church in Americas, Georgia. Bishop Melvin McCluster, pastor, her pastor, the Reverend Tommy Law, pastor of the Welcome Baptist Church of Americas, Georgia, will officiate. Her loving and devoted sister, the Reverend Cheryl Harris King, will deliver the eulogy. The burial will follow at Staley Memorial Gardens in Americas, Georgia. Mrs. Corrine Perry Peterson, age 83, of 1116 South 8th Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Thursday, October 5th at the Augusta University Hospital in Augusta, Georgia. Survivors include her loving and devoted children, Mr. Maurice Chanel of St. Petersburg, Florida, Ms. Deborah Williams of Cordele, Georgia, Mrs. Cheryl Murray and her husband, Mr. Jason Murray of Clearwater, Florida, Mr. Alex Chanel of St. Petersburg, Florida, Mrs. Valerie Taylor and her husband, Mr. Nick Taylor of Orlando, Florida, Mr. Herbert Wright and Mrs. Katana McHenry, both of Cordele, Georgia, and Ms. Sarah Lunsford of Valdosta, Georgia. Her beloved children she raised as her own, Miss Sierra Chanel Evans and her husband, Mr. Tony Evans, and Miss Latika Power and her husband, Mr. Jewel Power, both of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. Jeremy Chanel of St. Petersburg, Florida, and Miss Lillian Lewis of Rayford, North Carolina. 20 beloved grandchildren, 51 great-grandchildren, her beloved and devoted brothers, Mr. Harold Perry and his wife, Mrs. Patricia Perry, and Mr. David Perry and his wife, Mrs. Geraldine Perry, both of Cordele, Georgia, Mr. Joshua Freeman of Brandon, Florida, a host of devoted nieces and nephews, many cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends, to include Miss Valeria Peterson, Miss Ingrid Byram of Miami, Florida, Miss Mary Rawls, and Miss Ashley Stillwell, both of Cordele, Georgia, Miss Marie Hill of Columbus, Georgia, and Miss Linda Sims of Americus, Georgia. Survived Mrs. Corrine Perry Peterson, age 83, of 1116 South 8th Street, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Corrine Perry Peterson, age 83, will be held Friday, October 13th at 2 p.m. in the chapel of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home in Cordele, Georgia. Her pastor, the Reverend Darrell Leggett, pastor of the Cordele Church of God in Christ, will officiate. The eulogy will be delivered by her beloved cousin, the Reverend Larry James. The burial will follow at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. The public visitation will be Thursday, October 12th, from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mr. Dalvin Newman, age 31, of 209 Crescent Drive, Warner Robins, Georgia, died Saturday, September 16th in Warner Robins, Georgia. Survivors include his loving daughter, Miss Janice Newman, his loving and devoted mother, Mrs. Valerie Lumpkin Toombs of Warner Robins, Georgia, his beloved stepfather, Mr. Felix Wynn, his beloved sister, Miss Santron Adams, and Miss Kalita Lumpkin, both of Warner Robins, Georgia, a host of other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mr. Dalvin Newman, age 31, of 209 Crescent Drive, Warner Robins, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Dalvin Newman, age 31, will be held Saturday, October 14th at 10 a.m. in the sanctuary of the Beulah Land Baptist Church in Cordele, Georgia. Dr. Dwayne Daniels, pastor, the Reverend William D. Smith will officiate. The burial will follow at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. The public visitation will be Friday, October 13th, from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Miss Joyce Ann Whitis Polk, age 63, of 753 Hatley Road, Cordele, Georgia, died Monday, October 2nd, at the home of her beloved daughter in Wanakee, Iowa. Survivors include her beloved fiance, Mr. Walter Quarterman of Fitzgerald, Georgia, her loving and devoted children, Miss Karina Jeffries and her husband, Mr. Buford Jeffrey of Clarksville, Tennessee, and Mrs. Kawana Jones and her husband, Mr. Morris Jones of Wanakee, Iowa. 4 beloved grandchildren, 1 great-grandchild, her beloved sister, Mrs. Sarah Williamson, and her husband, Mr. Ernest Williamson of Cordele, Georgia. 1 beloved and devoted brother, Dr. Matthew Wayne Whites of Cordele, Georgia. 4 beloved sisters-in-law, Miss Dorothy Owens, Miss Claretha Whites, and Miss Carol Thomas, all of Cordele, Georgia, and Miss Joyce Brown of Warner Robins, Georgia. Her beloved aunts and uncle, Deacon Aaron Wallace, and his wife, Mrs. Mary Wallace of Cordele, Georgia, Mrs. Annie Eva Wallace, and Mother Carlton Wallace, both of Vienna, Georgia. A host of beloved nieces, nephews, cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Miss Joyce Ann Whites Polk, age 63, of 753 Hatley Road, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Miss Joyce Ann Whites Polk, age 63, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Mrs. Elizabeth Keaton Wiley Alexander, affectionately known as Pat, age 74, of 1805 Turner Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Friday, October 6th at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. Survivors include her loving, devoted husband, Mr. Billy Alexander of Cordele, Georgia, her loving and devoted sons, Mr. Jamel Wiley and his wife, Miss Shayla Wiley of Adel, Georgia, and Mr. Vincent Wiley of Cordele, Georgia. 4 beloved grandchildren, a beloved brother, Mr. Jimmy Keaton of Cordele, Georgia, a host of cousins, other relatives, and many, many sorrowing friends survive. Mrs. Elizabeth Keaton Wiley Alexander, affectionately known as Pat, age 74, of 1805 Turner Street, Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Elizabeth Keaton Wiley Alexander, affectionately known as Pat, age 74, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors, serving Cordele and Vienna, are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Friends, that conclude our funeral notices for this morning. And as always, we do remind you concerning our pre-funeral arrangements planning available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home, with packages available with a single pay, a 3-year pay, a 5-year pay, and a 10-year pay. So please stop by and talk with us concerning your pre-funeral arrangements needs available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. And also whole life insurance is available at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home.
The Friendship Baptist Church annual usher anniversary will be on Sunday, October 8th, today, beginning at 11 o'clock a.m. The pastor, Reverend Joseph Atkins, will deliver the message. Refreshments will be served. Sister Doris Clark, usher president. Reverend Joseph Atkins is the pastor. The New Poplar Spring Baptist Church will celebrate the 22nd pastoral anniversary of Pastor Johnny Dean on Sunday, October 15th at 9:45 a.m. Everyone has a cordial invitation to attend. Pastor Teacher Johnny Dean. You're invited to worship at the Greater Mars Tabernacle Baptist Church today. Worship service begins with Sunday school at 9 o'clock a.m., morning worship at 9:30 a.m. You may join them on Tuesday for midday prayer conference beginning at 12 o'clock noon. Thursday, prayer meeting and Bible study is held at 6 o'clock p.m. The call-in number for the conference call is 229-329-7611. Mother Mary Henderson, Church Mother, Deacon Arthur L. Parker, Chairman of Deacons, Dr. K.M. Williams is the pastor. The Mount Zion First African Baptist Church conference call scheduled Sunday morning begins at 10 o'clock a.m. Prayer Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 12 o'clock noon. Bible study is held each Wednesday at 5 o'clock p.m. The call-in number is 339-209-6419. Deacon Joe Wedges, Chairman of Deacons, Dr. Dan James III is the pastor. You're cordially invited to worship at the Gethsemane Baptist Church today. Worship service begins at 10:30 a.m. Mother Mary Butler, Church Mother, Deacon Johnny Wilson, Chairman of Deacons, Brother Cecil Straughter is the pastor. The Davis Chapel CME Church will have worship service each second and fourth Sunday beginning at 10 o'clock a.m. Face masks are required. Steward Ruby Barrett, Chairman of Stewards, Reverend Arnell Wilburn is the pastor. The Spring Hill Baptist Church invites everyone to worship with them each second and fourth Sunday beginning at 10 o'clock a.m. Sister Easter Patrick, Church Secretary, Mother Lily Mathis, Church Mother, Deacon Eddie Byron, Chairman of Deacons, Reverend Shannon Sillette is the pastor. You're cordially invited to worship with the Mount Calvary Baptist Church during its annual Men's Day service to be held on Sunday, October 15th at 10:30 a.m. Deacon Seneca Harris of Sumter County will be the guest speaker. Everyone has a cordial invitation to attend. Mother Evelyn Lewis, Church Mother, Deacon Leon Spears, Chairman of Deacons, Reverend Isaac Owens is the pastor. The New Oak Grove Baptist Church will observe the 23rd anniversary of Pastor W.W. Wilson on Sunday, October 15th. Sunday school at 9:15 a.m., worship service at 10 o'clock a.m. Reverend Terrell Tate will deliver the message. At 1:30 p.m., the St. Matthew Baptist Church and Mount Olive Baptist Church and Dr. H.C. Wilson will be in charge of the service. Deacon Alonzo Jones, Chairman of Deacons, Reverend W.W. Wilson is the pastor. The St. King Baptist Church of Cordele Family and Friends Day will be observed on Sunday, October 22nd at 10:15 a.m. The pastor, Reverend Woody C. Burnham, will deliver the message. At 2:30 p.m., Reverend Keith Lewis will deliver the message, and the Creek Boys will provide musical selections. Reverend Woody C. Burnham is the pastor. Everyone has a cordial invitation to worship with the beautiful Zion Baptist Church today. Worship service begins at 11 o'clock a.m. Mother Grace Patrick, Church Mother, Reverend Lorinda Ray is the pastor. You're cordially invited to worship at the Greater Gum Creek Baptist Church each first, second, third, and fourth Sunday beginning at 10:30 a.m. Mother Norma Solomon is the Church Mother. Deacon Lonnie Hagerbrook is Chairman of Deacons. Reverend Joseph Hagerbrook is the pastor. The Zion Hope Baptist Church invites everyone to fellowship with them each second Sunday beginning at 11:30 a.m. Mother Leela Smith, Church Mother, Deacon Xavier Bryant, Chairman of Deacons, Reverend Willie James Felton is the pastor. The Friendship Baptist Church, DeSoto Leslie, Friends and Family Day service will be held today, Sunday, October 8th at 11 o'clock a.m. An outdoor brown bag lunch will be given after the service. Deaconess Rosemary Sims, Program Director, Deacon Oscar Cooks, Chairman of Deacons, Reverend James Thomas is the pastor. The Big Bethel Baptist Church of Americus, Georgia 140th church anniversary will be observed today, Sunday, October 8th at 11 o'clock a.m. The pastor, Reverend Rod Hubbard, will deliver the message. At 2:30 p.m., the Gethsemane Worship Center and Bishop Frederick Williams will be the special guest. Big Bethel will observe Breast Cancer Awareness Sunday, October 15th at 11 o'clock a.m. Everyone is asked to wear pink in honor of cancer survivors. Reverend Rod Hubbard is the pastor. Freedom Harvest Worship Center of Leslie Fall Revival will be Monday, October 23rd through Thursday, October 26th. On program will be Monday, Bishop Melvin McCluster, Tuesday, Bishop George Edge, Wednesday, Minister Belinda Cutts Tyson, Thursday, Pastor Shirley Straughter. Freedom Harvest Youth expressing themselves in song and dance will be observed on Sunday, October 29th at 9 a.m. Minister Yolanda Robinson will be there as the facilitator for that event. Dr. Georgia Daraso is the pastor. The McAfee Grove Baptist Church Community Fellowship Day will be on Sunday, October 29th at 9 o'clock a.m. Pastor Anthony Walker will deliver the message. Everyone is asked to wear a mask. Food will be served after the service, and you're cordially invited to worship with them during their family night service on Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m., small class study on Thursday at 7 p.m., Sunday morning worship service at 9 a.m., and you may join them by using the code 425-436-6341. The access code is 708058. Minister Tawanda Daniels is the secretary. Dr. Robert L. Morgan Sr. is the pastor. The Cordial Lions Club, in conjunction with the 100-mile Peanut Walk, Peanut Pick and Yard Sale, will be on Saturday, October 14th from 7:30 a.m. until 3 o'clock p.m. Vendors are needed, and they look forward and ask if you have questions or concerns, or if you would like to become a vendor, that you will contact Brother Johnny Dennis at 322-8163. Food vendors will be Shell Seafood, Canona Ice, and J&B Barbecue. And also there will be other vendors available for clothes, shoes, toys, jewelry, and other things. So please contact Brother Johnny Dennis at 229-322-8163 for more information for the 100-mile Peanut Pick and Yard Sale, indoor-outdoor yard sale, sponsored by the Cordial Lions Club, and it will be held on Saturday, October the 14th from 7:30 a.m. until 3 o'clock p.m. A special note of thanks for all the prayers, texts, phone calls, and all acts of love and kindness shown on behalf of Miss Willie Mae Pounds, my daughter. I cannot thank everyone for everything that has been done. May God continue to bless and keep each of you is our prayer. And these words of thanks comes from Mrs. Eloise Butts and family for the care, kindness, and many prayers that were offered for her daughter, Miss Willie Mae Pounds. We pray that God will continue to bless her as she continues to grow strong. Again, at this time, we'd like to remind all of our friends that if you like to join us each Sunday morning at 7 o'clock a.m. live on the J.W. Williams Funeral Home YouTube channel, you may join us each Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Watch us live on the J.W. Williams Funeral Home YouTube channel. That concludes our announcements for this morning.
And now for dedication. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following in loving memory of Mr. Rex Allen Poole, who would have celebrated his birthday October 1st. Dedication requested by the Poole family, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mr. Wayne Williams, who would have celebrated his birthday October 9th. Dedication requested by the Williams family, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mr. Oscar Jones, also known as Tobe, who would have celebrated his birthday October 10th. Dedication requested by his beloved children, Deaconess President Cassandra Jackson, Miss Michelle West, Mr. Barry Jones, his beloved grandchildren, and the entire family and the staff of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. All remember Mr. Oscar Jones, better known as Tobe, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of the infant Alto Davis, who departed this life October 11, 1980, and would have celebrated a birthday October 11th. Dedication requested by his mother, Mrs. Mary Frances Davis. Precious memory lingers still. In loving memory of Mrs. Elizabeth Fletcher Brown, who departed this life October 11, 2011. Dedication requested by her beloved mother, Mother Minnie Fletcher, and the entire family, gone but not forgotten. In loving memory of Mrs. Lenny Tukes, who would have celebrated her birthday October 12, dedication requested by the Tooks family, gone but not forgotten. A loving memory, Miss Cynthia Pollock, who departed this life October 12, 2013. Dedication requested by the Pollock family, gone but not forgotten. A loving memory, Mrs. Gertrude Poole. Dedication requested by the Poole family. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following. Happy birthday to Miss Eunice Jordan, who celebrated her birthday Monday, October 2nd. Dedication requested by her beloved pastor, the Reverend Charles Cobb, and the members of the Free Providence Baptist Church of Vienna, Georgia. Happy birthday to Mrs. Eunice Jordan and many, many more. Happy birthday to Mr. Frederick Lewis, who celebrated his birthday Friday, October 6th. Dedication requested by the Lewis and Applin family. Mr. Frederick Lewis, happy birthday. Special birthday wishes goes out to Mrs. Annette Stembridge, who is celebrating her birthday today, October 8th. Dedication requested by her beloved family. Happy birthday, Mrs. Annette Stembridge. And special birthday goes out to the Reverend Dorothy Reeves Jones, who will celebrate her birthday Monday, October 9th. Dedication requested by her husband, Mr. Bobby Jones, her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and the entire family. Happy birthday to the Reverend Dorothy Reeves Jones, and special request from her son-in-law, the Reverend Isaac H. Owens of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home, his mother-in-law. Happy birthday to the Reverend Dorothy Reeves Jones on Monday, October 9th. Happy birthday to Mrs. Betty Jean James Walker, who will celebrate her birthday Tuesday, October 10th. Dedication requested by her beloved family. Happy birthday, Mrs. Betty Jean James Walker. And special birthday goes out to my niece, Mrs. Rosalind Johnson Porter, who will celebrate her birthday Tuesday, October 10th. Dedication requested by her children, the entire family, and the members of the Greater Mars Tabernacle Baptist Church of Pastor Dr. K.M. Williams, Deacon Tommy Ford Jr. All says happy birthday to Mrs. Rosalind Johnson Porter on Tuesday, October 10th. Happy birthday, Pig, and many, many more. Our first selection this morning is dedicated to the following: Deacon James Smith and family, Deacon Henry King of the Gethsemane Missionary Baptist Church, and church mother, Mother Mary Butler, Mother Leela Honey Smith and family, Mr. A.J. and Mother Vera Rivers and family, Cordial Commissioner Mrs. Vesta Shepherd and the entire Shepherd and Bill family, Chris County Coroner, Mr. Deacon Ricky Dawson and family, Mother Grace Patrick and family, Mrs. Willie Mae Leary and family of Hatley, Georgia, Mother Willie Mae Walker and family, Mayor Juanita Kinchin of the city of Warwick, Georgia, Brother Mark Westbrook and family, his parents, Deacon and Mrs. Odell Westbrook and family, Chairman Deacon Roger and Sister Brenda Westbrook and family, Mother Lois Butts and family, Deacon James and Dr. Elizabeth Maddox and family, Mother Eddie Mae Graper and family, Mrs. Essie Gay and family, Ms. Gwendolyn Henderson and family, Mrs. Eddie Ruth White and family, Mother Lucinda Ray and family, Mother Adeline Lofton and family, Mrs. Faye Brown and family, Deacon Joed Clark and family of Leslie, Georgia, Deacon Oscar Cooks, Chairman of the Board of Deacons of the Friendship Baptist Church of DeSoto, Georgia, and the members of the Friendship Baptist Church, Ms. Dessa Fuller and family, the entire Fuller, Mercer, and Mitchell families, the Reverend Johnny and Dr. Deanne Hosley and family, and Mother Maria Wright and family, Deacon George Jordan and family of Vienna, Georgia, Deacon Jerome Jordan and family, retired educator Mrs. Margaret Jordan and family, Ms. Willie Mae Crapp and family, Mr. F.D. Lawton and family, Mrs. Dorothy Coleman and family, Mrs. Donna H. Cobb and family, Miss Val Carter and family, Mr. Sammy Epps Jr. and family, Mrs. Bobby Joe Robertson family, Mrs. Selma Jackson and family, Miss Sean Hutchison and family, Mrs. Geraldine Perry and family, Mrs. Bernice Relaford and family, Miss Janice Bush and family, Miss Lois Reynolds and family, Miss Sarah Jackson and family, Miss Mary Bynes Applin and family, Mrs. Gussie Lee Daniels and family, Mr. and Mrs. Rayfield Baldwin and family, Mrs. Shirley Ray and family, Mrs. Bernice Lester and family, Mrs. Ida Ruth Bryan and family, Deacon Johnny Lee Little and family, Mr. Jake, Deacon Jake and Mrs. Mary Reese and family, Mother Diane Flood and family, Mrs. Mary Frances Davis and family, Miss Katrina Davis and family, Mother Mamie Robinson and family, Deacon Kelvin and Mrs. Rosemary Jones and family, Mrs. Naisha Davis and family, Miss LaShonda Donaldson and family, Mr. Justin Colbert and family, Mr. Reza Stubbins and family, Mr. Joseph Glenn and family, Mrs. Nebby Crawls and family, Miss Mary Taylor and family, Mother Willie McGill and family, Mrs. Burrow Patrick and family, Mrs. Aletha Askew, church clerk and trustee of the New Oak Grove Baptist Church, the Reverend and Mrs. Dion Jones and family, Mr. Judge and Mrs. Tommy Glenn and family, Mother Nellie Whitis and family, the Reverend Joseph, Mrs. Christine Hollenbrook and family, Deaconess Martha A. Cross and family, Mr. Richard and Mrs. Brenda Cross and family, Mr. and Mrs. Harry Henderson and family, Miss Gloria Lester and family, Mr. Willie James Perry and family, Deacon Johnny and Mrs. Vera Perry and family, Vienna, Georgia, Mother Mary Benjamin and family, Mother Carlton Wallace and family, Mr. Willie B. Brown and family, Mrs. Beatrice Walker and family, Mr. and Mrs. Johnny Taylor and family, Mrs. Gracie Walker and family, Mrs. Shelley Pearl Walker and family, the Reverend Revis McLaren and family, Deacon and Mrs. Oscar James and family, the Whitehead family of Unadilla, Georgia, Mr. Larry Collier and family, Mr. Charles Collier and family, Mr. and Mrs. Carl Henry and family, Mrs. George Marchman and family, the Fred Haddock family of Dooley County, Mr. Dobie Peacock and family, Mrs. Charlie Mae Peacock and family, Deacon and Mrs. Henry Peacock Sr., and Mr. and Mrs. Henry Peacock Jr. and family, Mrs. Annie Lewis and family, the family of the late Mother Pearlie Mae Perry of Vienna, Georgia, the Harriel family, the J.B. Kendrick family, Mrs. Corrine Bell Smith and family, Deacon and Mrs. David Leary and family, Deacon and Mrs. Walter Leary and family, Mr. and Mrs. Bobby Brown and family, Deacon Bob Fuse and family, Mrs. Pauline Bryan and family, Mrs. Carrie McGee and family, the family of the late Reverend Walter Carter of Vienna, Georgia, Mrs. Evelyn Green and family, Shirley Killings and family, Dr. George Cleveland and family, Mr. Willie Cooper and family, Mrs. Vet T. Crane and family of Pinehurst, Georgia, Mr. and Mrs. Tony Thomas and family, Mrs. Abby Bivens and family, Deacon John David Law, chairman of the Deacon of the Evergreen Baptist Church of Pinehurst, Georgia, Mr. and Mrs. Willie Jordan and family, Mr. and Mrs. Willie B. Barnes and family of Vienna, Georgia, Mrs. Mary Nell London family, Mrs. Virginia Hill Mumphrey and family, the family of the late Pastor Kathy Griffins of the Trial of Faith Church of Vienna, Georgia, Mrs. Georgia Bryan and family, Mrs. Bessie Byram and family, Mrs. Paula Hayes and family, Mrs. Anna Armstrong and family, Mrs. Pearlie Wallace and family, Mr. and Mrs. Willie Green and family, Miss Rosa Crane and family, Mr. William Green and family, Mr. James Lester and family, the Everson family, Mr. and Mrs. Lonnie Anderson and family, Miss Corrine West and family, Mr. and Mrs. Sammy Lewis and family, Miss Leslie Williams and family, Mrs. Eddie Mathis and family, Miss Carol Smith and family, Mr. and Mrs. Lynn Thomas and family, Miss Margaret Whitehead and family, Mr. and Mrs. Ernie Cheney and family, Ms. Willie McGill, Ms. Willie Jones and family, Mr. and Mrs. James Bryant Jr. and family, Mr. James Bryant Sr. and family, Ms. Leila Lewis and family, Mr. Homer Swain and family, Mr. Kenneth Lester of Byronville, Georgia. Our first selection this morning goes out to my neighbor, Mother Theron Jones and the entire Jones and Tarbert family, Deacon and Mrs. John Stubbs and family, Deacon and Mrs. Donald Tarbert and family, Mrs. Juanita Mathis Tarbert and family. Our first selection for this morning. It is certainly with the deepest regret that we make the following announcement. Mother Fannie Lee Harris Butler, age 87 of 205 Burden Circle, Americus, Georgia, died Wednesday, October 4th at the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center in Americus, Georgia. The funeral service for Mother Fannie Lee Harris Butler, age 87, will be held Monday, October 9th at 12 noon in the sanctuary of the Friendship Baptist Church in Americus, Georgia. Bishop Melvin McCluster, her pastor, the Reverend Tommy Law, pastor of the Welcome Baptist Church, will officiate. Her beloved sister, the Reverend Cheryl Harris King, will deliver the eulogy. The burial will follow at Staley Memorial Garden in Americus, Georgia. The public visitation will be today, Sunday, from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mrs. Corrine Perry Peterson, age 83, of 1116 South 8th Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Thursday, October 5th at the Augusta University Hospital in Augusta, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Corrine Perry Peterson, age 83, will be held Friday, October 13th at 2 p.m. in the chapel of the J.W. Williams Funeral Home in Cordele, Georgia. Her pastor, the Reverend Darrell Leggett, pastor of the Cordele Church of God in Christ, will officiate. The eulogy will be delivered by her beloved cousin, the Reverend Larry James. The burial will follow at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. The public visitation will be Thursday, October 12th, from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Mr. Dalvin Newman, age 31, of 209 Crescent Drive, Warner Robins, Georgia, died Saturday, September 16th, in Warner Robins, Georgia. The funeral service for Mr. Dalvin Newman will be held Saturday, October 14th at 10 a.m. in the sanctuary of the Beulah Land Baptist Church in Cordele, Georgia. Dr. Dwayne Daniels, pastor, the Reverend William D. Smith will officiate. The burial will follow at the Bethel Cemetery in Cordele, Georgia. The public visitation will be Friday, October 13th, from 1 until 5 p.m. at the J.W. Williams Funeral Home. Miss Joyce Ann Whitis Pope, age 63, of 7 53 Hatley Road, Cordele, Georgia, died Monday, October 2nd, at the home of her beloved daughter in Wanakee, Iowa. The funeral service for Miss Joyce Ann Whitis Polk, age 63, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. Mrs. Elizabeth Keaton Wiley Alexander, affectionately known as Pat, age 74, of 1805 Turner Street, Cordele, Georgia, died Friday, October 6th at the Chris Regional Hospital in Cordele, Georgia. The funeral service for Mrs. Elizabeth Keaton Wiley Alexander, affectionately known as Pat, will be announced at a later date, pending the completion of the arrangements. The J.W. Williams Funeral Directors serving Cordele and Vienna are in charge of each of these arrangements during this week. Our next and final selection for this morning is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones were laid to rest during the past week. The family of Mr. Garrett Carter of Americus, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Dorothy Ruth Smith Ray of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Miss Delangela LaShawn Blackman Carter of Hawkinsville, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Ruby Mae Harrington Ross of Cordele, Georgia. This selection is dedicated to the bereaved families whose loved ones will be laid to rest during this week. The family of Mother Fannie Lee Harris Butler of Americus, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Corrine Perry Peterson of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mr. Dalvin Newman of Warner Robins, Georgia. The family of Miss Joyce Ann Whitis Polk of Cordele, Georgia. The family of Mrs. Elizabeth Keaton Wiley Alexander of Cordele, Georgia. This selection is dedicated to all of the sick and shut-in, to all patients in the local and surrounding hospitals, nursing homes, and rehabilitation centers, to our beloved ministers and our devoted family members, to all retired educators, to the men and women serving in armed forces, both stateside and abroad, to all veterans, and to everyone who listens to our program on each Sunday morning. It's a pleasure for us to bring it to you. Our program goes out in memory of our past president, Dr. Napoleon Williams, to my wife, Mrs. Calandra Wilkerson Parker, to my son, Jai Wilkerson Parker, and to each and every one. God bless you on this second Sunday in October 2023.